that is still importing close to 80% of its power, mostly from South Africa's Eskom. But now pushing forward with purpose to rewrite its energy future. In December 2024, Standard Bank did what no local financier had done before, sealing a 567 million Emalangeni deal for the Lower Makutuza hydro project. It's the first utility-scale hydro plant financed right here at home, and this is just the beginning. Well, across Africa, the Standard Bank Group has committed 450 billion rands to sustainable finance capital by 2028. In Eswatini, it's driving solar PV rollouts for MSMEs, especially in agribusiness, where power and profitability are tightly linked. So the question isn't if the transition is happening, but it's how fast, how smart, and how far it can take us. Well, to help us connect the dots between the deals, the development, and Eswatini's quest for energy sovereignty, I'm joined by the very people that are making it happen. Mr. Mlamuli Hlachwayo, he is the head of business and commercial banking, as well as Mrs. Lomkhosi Alabi. She's the head of transactional products and client coverage at Standard Bank Eswatini. Very good afternoon to the both of you. You guys are looking lovely, by the way. And perhaps I do want to extend a request that might have one of those pins, those gold pins. would be good for the camera.
I'll drop mine
right
before
now.
I leave.
I'll have yours. You are the best. That's right. Well, let's start here. There's a lot of talk about renewables being costly upfront, that is. But from where you stand, what would you say are the real long-term financial wins for Eswatini as we shift towards cleaner energy? Of course.
And good afternoon, and thank you for having us through here today. I think, yes, the initial investments may look like they're hefty, in terms of what you invest as far as the renewable energy is concerned.
Right.
But I think as a country, we need to look at the pros and cons. And when I say we need to look at the pros and cons, we need to look at it firstly from the renewable energy space in terms of the fact that we're taking on clean energy in terms of what we're embedding within our society.
Right.
But the bigger conversation, Mnguni, is over and above just the cost of the renewables is the climate change issue, which is a reality. That is a reality in terms of what is happening to our planet and how we respond to it. So yes, renewable energy upfront may look like it's actually costly, but the long impact and the long-term benefit for us outweighs the costs as well. And I think also even with the other technologies, they also have long-term costs. So when you just weigh those costs alongside, you are able to justify the just transition that we're actually looking for and implementing and embedding renewable energy as well.
Yeah, Mr. Hlachwayo, do you want to chime in? She's mentioning climate change as one of the major reasons why this is a reality.
Yeah, Mnguni, so what I'd argue that, with the increase in generation capacity, technological innovation,
right.
And adoption of renewables globally, we've seen quite a sharp decline in the cost of renewable energy equipment across all technologies. Further to that, we've seen some additional financial inflows coming in through either by way of grants, by way of equity, by way of government investment, public-private partnerships that have come in. That's starting to make the renewables conversation a lot more viable. In addition to that, in the government of Eswatini, we've also seen an increase in spend on renewables across all sectors. And as a bank, we are providing long-term investment, long-term support into those sectors as we drive the imperative that we're driving as Standard Bank Eswatini and as a Standard Bank Group for the just energy transition.
And it's quite the imperative, not only for Standard Bank, not only for Eswatini, but for the whole world. And I want to understand, because obviously energy projects are not simple. They require a lot of expertise and a lot of strong backing financially and otherwise. How does Standard Bank manages the financial risks that come with these renewable energy investments?
Okay. I'm happy to start us off. I think one of the things that we boast as Standard Bank is our expertise and our ability to do business in Africa. And when I say our ability to do a business in Africa, we are across 21 countries in Africa. And what we have is we have experts in renewable energy, experts in power and energy, and also in embedding projects, within Africa. So we've been able to leverage our skills. We've been able to leverage our collaboration. We've been able to leverage our partnerships as well. And when I say our partnerships, when you mentioned the Lower Makuduza project, it's an over 1.1 billion project. And that actually came through, with partnerships of collaborations and bringing other players into that. And so that also involves, in terms of us as a bank, taking on the financial risk where we can, but in other instances, finding other financiers. The development financiers are out there, your UNDPs. I think Mahaisat actually mentioned those, that they also come into play.
Yeah.
So as far as managing the risk, we will take what we have appetite for. We have the expertise.
Right.
We have the teams. We boast that prowess as Standard Bank.
Right. So it's a collaboration prowess as well as just the expertise that you have as Standard Bank. And I love the fact that you mentioned with pride that you operate in over 21 countries in Africa, I want to believe. And that is very impressive. Mr. Hlachwa, you want to chime in here? How do you manage the risk?
Certainly. So one of the things, Lomkhosi just mentioned earlier that we've got sectoral expertise.
Yeah.
In addition to that, how we then try to de-risk the portfolio is through working with the EPCs, which are the engineering procurement contractors, who work through the life cycle of a project, whether it's through installation, maintenance. And in addition to that, we have aligned ourselves with Tier 1 original equipment manufacturers to stay abreast of recent market developments so that we can respond aptly to market and client needs.
And that's a very proactive approach to it. And again, I suppose it sort of validates what she had mentioned earlier, that you like to collaborate, you collaborate with people with the necessary expertise. Lomkhosi, coming back to you, you did mention that the Lower Makuduza hydro deal is very expensive, the tune of 0.1 billion up. It's a game changer. I think we can agree on that. The first local utility scale hydro project to get funded right here. I want to ask to you how Standard Bank stepped up as the lead arranger, one, and how this fits into the bigger picture with your 450 million rand sustainable finance pledge.
Okay. So obviously for us to get the lead arranger, we had to go out in terms of tender for the opportunity. So the opportunity came through, and as a bank, we pitched and we were awarded that lead arranger mandate. And, to your point, this deal, Mnguni, is a first of a kind for Eswatini, but it is also a first of a kind for the bank, within Africa. So we as Eswatini I'd have to say we were the prototype. We are the first in terms of the frontier as far as the hydro project. So from a Standard Bank group, it's a big deal for us, in terms of landing this opportunity. It's a big deal for us, for Eswatini, in terms of the energy transition and transforming the energy landscape and ensuring that we're actually moving, towards energy security. But for us as well within the bank, it's a big deal because there's key learnings that we learned from packaging a deal such as this. There's key opportunities that we were able to identify, and there's also key downsides that we were able to work through, as we were actually navigating such a transaction. This type of a transaction is a structured transaction. And when we put structured transactions together, there is a number of complexities that come in at play. So across the transaction, there were points where we would then have to be navigating, certain issues where we would then say, okay, now, how do we get through this? How do we get through this hoop? So there was a lot of learnings. So it's key for us as a bank for the fact that it's the first that's been landed, from a hydro perspective. It's key for us as a bank as well because there were key learnings that we actually got out of the Lower Makuduza project. It's also key for us because we've hosted this Indaba for the past 3 years, and we needed that proof point. And this is the point where we said, from a corporate and investment banking perspective, we've actually been able to put the proof on the table that we are able to put transactions such as this and make sure that it actually works.
Makes sense. You're not only a lead arranger in theory, but in practice as well. I will come back to you, Mr. Hlachwayo, after the break, though. I want to understand something very important. The government of the Kingdom of Eswatini has a very strong focus on agribusiness, one for food security and for, export-driven economy that we want to become as Eswatini. And I know that your team works closely on that particular front. Let's go to our first ad break. We'll be back shortly. Our conversation continues. Welcome back. You're still watching our special broadcast that is powered by Standard Bank, and no puns are intended there. It is indeed powered by Standard Bank. We are continuing this conversation now, and we have a question that is very important for you, Mr. Hlachwayo. We know that your team works closely with the agribusiness. You back them financially, and you make sure that they are efficient, so to speak. What are some of the projects that you've recently backed?
Certainly, Mguni, we are very much well entrenched in the agricultural ecosystem as a bank. We understand the call to action from government around food sovereignty. And with that call to action, we've really entrenched ourselves. What we also understand, Mguni, within that value chain is that farmers tend to feel the effects of climate change first. More than anything, when we look at some of the value chains, particularly in sugar, when we look at the operational expenses, about 60% of the operational expenses are due to electricity. And our response to that as a bank, we've put together a value proposition that enables the farmers to not only to be able to get energy through alternative means, whether it's through solar PV, we're also doing agricultural engineering just to check if the pumps and everything, are they fit for purpose. Ours is not a conversation around we've fitted the solar, we've walked away. So we work with the EPCs, agricultural engineers, to ensure that there's a golden thread that weaves back, so that we can ensure that our farmers are resilient through climate change. They are able to respond to the ever-increasing costs of power, and thereby ensure that the country has got food sovereignty, and there's some economic activity that is happening within that value chain.
And I suppose you're also, indirectly touching on some of the other technologies, renewable technologies that are next in line for Eswatini. And Lomkhosi, I know that you have insight in terms of, what is next in terms of renewable energies and the next technologies, solar, biomass, wind. What's on your radar? Where are you today? Are you ready to invest?
We are ready as a bank. The 450 billion
it's a lot of
in
money.
part has to come into Eswatini. So we are looking at solar.
Okay.
We are also looking at wind projects. We have a number of our clients that are looking at massive biomass opportunities as well. We also recognize the fact that there is the environmental component, so also going into the renewable technologies. The necessary studies are being done to ensure that from an environmental context that we've actually covered the analysis that needs to be done, as far as that's concerned. So from a renewable perspective, we do have the appetite in terms of looking at the technologies that I've actually outlined, with the considerations of ensuring that the sustainability aspect is taken into consideration, the environmental aspect as well is also taken into consideration as well.
Yeah. I think what we can agree on, I mean, even the viewers can agree that the bank is big on agribusiness, and there seems to be quite the intentional sort of focus on agribusiness. But I wonder, in terms of how you tailor your SME loans, how do you do that in terms of the offerings that will help Eswatini's agripreneurs grow and thrive? I suppose that's a question for the both of you.
Well, the first thing that's important is that we need to ensure that the entrepreneurs, first of all, whatever we do to support them with their energy requirements, they can yield the benefit at the end of the day. The first being that it needs to be affordable.
Yeah.
We try as best as practically possible to work with the EPCs that know what they're doing, that can then turn around. I mean, earlier on I spoke about the cost of production of electricity. Remember that at the point in time that the entrepreneur needs to actually own the assets, so the affordability is a very key aspect. And what we pride ourselves on is the sectoral expertise, the EPCs, the partnerships that we have to ensure that it's actually affordable.
Do you want to chime in? Or?
And so what we do to support that is that within the ecosystem, we bank the larger corporates. And so as we bank the larger corporates, we are also able to leverage that in terms of the SMEs as well, in terms of that relationship and their ability to access finance. And I'll just speak that maybe from the small cane growers perspective.
Okay.
So we have that ecosystem approach where we work hand in hand with with his teams, just to ensure that where we are embedded, we are able to collaborate, to partner, and work together in that regard.
Let's walk through the typical process. Obviously, there is sizing up the site, there is vetting the contractors, if you like, to setting up the repayment plans, right? How do you put together a commercial solar project, and what kind of payback timeline are we looking at there?
Okay, so I'll speak for the corporate banking, yeah. So it's
Yeah.
it's quite a process, and when I say it's quite a process, these projects can take anything from 18 to 24 months in terms of getting everything, on ground and getting to a point where you now have a project that's actually all systems go and ready to actually be banked. What we don't do is feasibility studies. So by the time you come through for funding and finance, that feasibility aspect should already have been done. And then from the time of the engagement in terms of the models, interrogating them, and just making sure that your project gets bedded down. It can take anything, from the 6-month to the 24-month horizon. And when I say give you that parameter, it's because of the flow of the information. It's also the fact that it has to go through the rigorous assessments that the projects have to go through in terms of actually landing them, on the ground. We do have a project that we've done for EEC, I think the Lavumusa project, where that solar project, that in itself also took, a while for us to actually get it embedded. So it does take a process, I think, to actually land the project. And from what Mhaisa said, you'd need to bring in the right experts, just to ensure that, everything stacks up. At the end of the day, Mnguni, these are your funds as depositors. So it is critical and imperative that when we do these transactions, we ensure that everything has been assessed in terms of the project.
Yeah. Mhaisa, let me come back to you. We have established energy and agriculture are closely linked.
Of course.
Are you seeing a mindset shift from the agripreneurs where they are looking at renewable energy not as an overhead, but as a tool that they need? I think that is very important, how they receive that.
Certainly, Mnguni, and we've actually seen it go even deeper than just an energy conversation.
Right.
We've seen our farmers go into smart agricultural practices, and if you'll allow me, I have a proof point. This story excites me a bit. I have a client that's down in the Lowveld. in farming, and they do not deploy any pesticide onto their farm. Instead, what they do, they import some insects that are deployed onto the farm. Those insects are able to eliminate the pests without harming the actual produce that's being produced.
Wow.
So that's one of the proof points that we have in just how we've entrenched ourselves in more than just energy and sustainability. But coming back to the energy conversation,
right.
What we've seen is that, while we do support our clients over a long-term and patient capital sort of period, what we've seen is a repayment period of anything between 4 to 5 years, whereas the initial mandate was on a 10-year horizon. And that is a culmination of all of the practices that our clients are putting in, not only looking at the energy, but also looking at the smart agricultural practices and also the agricultural engineering that then brings about the efficiencies to then drive the energy sovereignty agenda that the country is trying to drive.
Very, very informative. I didn't know that as we look at the smart and alternative ways, we can really go into nature, and I suppose it really fits into the conversation that we are having. And the Kingdom of Eswatini, it just tells you that as we continue to want to be export-driven, the food that we are going to export, we are not going to have to worry about the quality and the standards and the safety, because we will not be using pesticides anymore. Our conversation continues after the break. Welcome back. You are still watching the special broadcast that is powered by Standard Bank. Lomkhosi, let's get back to you. We have a very, very little time remaining, but I'm not limiting you on your answer on this very important question. We've established that Standard Bank boasts that it operates in multiple African nations, and I suppose there's an opportunity there to sort of benchmark, to learn, to identify opportunities as well as challenges that we can co-opt here in Eswatini. What are some of those?
I think one of the first ones, the one that we've seen recently, in Zambia, there was large investments in hydro. And when there was large investments in hydro, one of the things that we're aware of is that hydro is largely dependent on water. And at the point when the water ran out, Zambia, which at some point was self-sufficient in terms of the energy deficit, which is, the word that we keep hearing going on as far as Africa is concerned, then moved backwards, because of the dependency on hydro. So I think one of the key lessons for us, as Eswatini, is also in funding projects is the right energy mix. When clients come to us understanding that, okay, if you're doing hydro, what are the other technologies that you're actually going to bring in place? If it's solar, because we also understand that, there's a certain level of the percentage of the sunlight. And at some points in the day or at any point in time, there might not be generation, of energy in that particular regard. So one of the things that we've learned, just from what we've seen across from our counterparts is ensuring that there's the right energy mix. Okay. We have independent power producers that are coming in through some of the corporations, and as they come in through those corporations, we're actually looking at that energy mix to ensure that it's a diversified portfolio that will actually ensure that there is consistent energy in supply.
Let me come to you, Mhaise. Let's talk scalability.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've mentioned that you have this advantage where, and it's a proactive approach that you have as Standard Bank to work with the big corporates, and it gives you the data onto the downstream and the smaller, SMEs, and I suppose that helps in this particular sort of opportunity. I want to understand, how do you, as a Standard Bank, make sure that you are now able to transition from an SME into, in Eswatini we say, Boson Vonzima?
Yeah, certainly. And as business and commercial, we're deeply entrenched in indigenous businesses.
Right.
And if you think of it, earlier on I spoke about the decline we're seeing in the price of solar or energy-related products. In saying that, where we see our role as business and commercial, or broadly as Standard Bank, is growing indeed the entrepreneurs from MSMEs into medium-sized corporates, and hopefully one day they compete on a global scale in the corporate and investment banking space. How we ensure this, or where we see the opportunity, as we bring in the efficiencies, we understand that entities may have some scope to expand into other avenues. As the other avenues they grow into, it means that the entity is growing. From there, we're also able to tap into the broad ecosystem that Standard Bank has across markets, where we're currently driving an initiative called Trade Beyond Borders, where we're then able to embed our people in the broader ecosystem, where we expose them to other markets. That way they grow, and we can actually learn from them. And we also try to cross-pollinate, bring in expertise from other countries to come and help our entrepreneurs for them to grow. So certainly ours is a growth agenda. We don't want our MSMEs to remain MSMEs, and we actually do have, again, some proof points where we've seen entities grow, entities that started off on a 50,000 emalangeni loan a couple of years ago that are now starting to turn over more than $500 million in turnover today. So those are the proof points, and that is what we're all about at Standard Bank.
I love the data. There's a lot of bragging there, but I love it. I love it. It's part of the conversation. Let me come back to you, Mrs. Alabi. When we talk just transition, that word just is normally, primarily owned by the conversation around energy, but a just transition, I suppose, doesn't just talk energy. It also speaks inclusion, inclusive growth. Are you intentional? Is the bank intentional about having women who have been on the margins for too long, but the youth as well, that they are part of this drive, especially in access to finance?
I have to say we are intentional. Some of the programs that we do partner with the RSTP in terms of the entrepreneurship programs are open to young people, are also open to diversity as far as Eswatini is concerned. I think as far as women are concerned, I think we're one of the banks where our CE is really at the forefront in terms of ensuring that there is inclusion as far as that is concerned. As a bank, we're intentional in terms of ensuring inclusivity and ensuring that everyone participates in our economy, as well as from the energy perspective. I think there is also forums that, even as us women in the bank, are part of forums such as Women in Energy in Eswatini. And I think that's part of the drive to actually have the inclusivity as well, even just on a professional level as well.
All right. I think my producer is notifying me that our time has run up. But as a parting shot, I want to give you an opportunity as well, Mr. Hlachwa. Is there anything else that you may want to share about Standard Bank's role in pushing Eswatini's sustainable energy's future forward?
In the interest of time, it suffices for me to say Eswatini is our home and we drive our growth. The bank in Eswatini and the broader group is really, really entrenched in driving that agenda. More relevant to today's conversation is around sustainability, the energy sovereignty of the country. So we are committed, and like I said, Eswatini is our home and we drive our growth.
Well, Mrs. Alabi, you spoke before he spoke, so I suppose I do have the right to thank the both of you for your time here. Very insightful, very informative, but also very important work that you are doing as a Standard Bank. Let's thank our viewers as well for staying with us here on this very important special broadcast of Standard Bank Energy Indaba 2025. From financing Eswatini's first major hydro project to also empowering small agribusinesses with clean energy. The story is very clear, and I suppose we can all agree that energy isn't just about infrastructure, but it is also about independence, and that is exactly what Standard Bank is pushing for. Have yourselves a good afternoon. Bye-bye.